Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we are going deep
Yeah.
into something I find fascinating and pretty unsettling, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's football fan violence.
Yeah.
Specifically, this thing called hooliganism that's been plaguing Europe for a long time.
A long time.
You've sent in some fascinating sources for this deep dive.
Yeah, we got some great stuff.
We have history. We've got recent events.
Yeah.
We even have some analysis of the problem.
That's right. Really?
Yeah. This is
Interesting mix.
it's a topic that's often just oversimplified.
Yeah.
You know, just reduced to a few drunken brawls.
Right.
But it's really much more layered than that.
Okay.
And hopefully this deep dive can help us all understand not just what hooliganism is,
Yeah.
but also the WHY behind it.
Right.
And maybe even explore some potential solutions.
Definitely. I'm already picturing flying bar stools in Dortmund.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the incidents.
I'm sure from the sources.
Yeah.
And it's clear this goes way beyond.
Way beyond.
Just a bit of rowdiness.
Yeah.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty,
Sure.
what exactly is hooliganism?
Now, the term itself is fascinating. It's believed to have originated all the way back in the 19th century.
Wow.
From an English music hall song about a rowdy family.
Okay.
The Hooligans.
Huh?
So over time, that term, it evolved to represent violence and disorder.
Yeah.
But specifically in the context of sports, particularly football.
Makes sense.
And here's the key. Hooliganism often involves organized groups,
Okay.
not just these spontaneous outbursts.
Interesting.
And these groups often have very specific motivations.
So there's a level of premeditation of planning involved.
Exactly.
It's not just fans getting caught up in the moment.
Precisely. Alcohol definitely plays a role, but it's often a symptom, not the root cause.
So these acts of violence are often orchestrated with a level of intentionality that makes them all the more disturbing.
All the more disturbing.
Okay, that's pretty chilling.
Yeah.
Thinking about Europe.
Sure.
The sources mention several hotspots for this kind of organized fan violence.
Right.
England seems like an obvious place to start.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's considered the birthplace of football after all.
Yeah. England has a long and unfortunately quite notorious history of football hooliganism.
Yeah.
Especially during the 70s and 80s.
Right.
They've implemented stricter measures over the years.
Okay.
But it hasn't disappeared entirely.
So it's still a problem.
Oh, yeah. Even during the Euro 2020 final,
Wow.
there were major issues.
Right.
Violence fans forcing entry without tickets.
Oh, wow.
And even racial abuse directed at players.
That's shocking that even with all the security measures in place today,
I know.
this is still happening.
It's wild.
Makes you wonder if just cracking down harder is really the answer.
Yeah.
But we'll get to solutions later.
Sure.
What about other countries?
Yeah.
The Netherlands was mentioned.
Yes.
And I know there was a particularly troubling incident there recently.
Yes, the Ajax-Maccabi Tel Aviv match in November.
Right.
This incident wasn't just about football rivalry. It was deeply intertwined with existing religious and political tensions.
Oh, wow.
There were reports of Israeli fans attacking people who displayed Palestinian symbols.
Oh, gosh.
And chanting racist slogans. And then after the match, reports came out about Israeli fans being targeted and assaulted.
So it goes way beyond just which team you support.
Yeah.
It becomes a vehicle for expressing these deep-seated prejudices and hatred.
Exactly. And this incident also sparked another controversy.
Okay.
When the Amsterdam mayor used the term pogrom to describe the attack.
Yes. That sparked a strong reaction from the Israeli government.
Absolutely. They condemned the use of that word.
Yeah.
Arguing that it minimized the historical significance of the Holocaust.
Yeah, I remember that.
Especially given that that word pogrom is historically linked to organized violence against Jews.
Right.
So this highlights how football violence can quickly escalate into a much larger and more sensitive political issue.
It's like a tinderbox.
Yeah.
Ready to ignite with the slightest spark.
It really is.
Okay, Germany also came up in the sources.
Yes.
What's happening there?
Well, we have two distinct examples from Germany.
Okay.
The first one is a specific incident of Dutch fans attacking English supporters outside a Dortmund restaurant.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, it started with some taunting between rival fans.
Okay.
But quickly spiraled into a full-blown brawl.
Oh, gosh.
Bar stools flying, glass shattering, even a TV overturned.
Wow, I'm trying to picture this flying bar stools.
I know.
It must have been terrifying for anyone caught in the middle of that.
It sounds like absolute chaos.
Goodness.
And what's interesting is that this wasn't during a match. This was just fans gathering before a game.
So like a pre-game thing.
Yeah. Which makes you wonder if these tensions are always just simmering below the surface.
That's a really disturbing thought.
It is.
What was the other German example? Was it another specific incident?
This one is less about a single event and more about a worrying trend.
It's okay.
The sources point to growing concern about far-right ideologies seeping into some German fan groups. These groups are being linked to attacks on immigrants.
Oh, wow.
And a rise in xenophobia within the football community.
So it's almost like football is being used as a platform or recruiting ground for these extremist ideologies.
That's a concern that's being raised, yes.
Wow.
And it's not unique to Germany either.
Right. The sources mention a strong link between hooliganism and nationalism in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Particularly in countries like Serbia and Poland.
That's right.
And there was a mention of how some hooligan groups in those countries operate almost like organized crime syndicates, with their actions often fueled by this strong sense of nationalism.
Yes.
Which sometimes spills over into xenophobia.
That's right. Their activities extend beyond just football matches.
Gosh.
They're intertwined with the criminal underworld.
Wow.
And often have a political agenda as well.
Okay, so we've got England, the Netherlands, Germany, Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
It seems like hooliganism is a pretty widespread problem with deep roots.
It is.
Where else are we seeing serious issues?
Well, Italy comes to mind.
Yeah.
It also has a long history of football violence. And the sources highlight the presence of mafia-like structures within some fan groups.
Oh, wow.
Especially in the South.
Okay.
Rivalries like the one between Roma and Lazio can be incredibly fierce.
Wow.
And often erupt in violence.
So we've seen this pattern of hooliganism across Europe, with different countries having their own unique flavors of the problem.
Right.
But it's clear this isn't just about football rivalry. We're talking about this complex web of social, political, and even criminal elements.
It's complex.
But what's at the heart of it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no simple answer.
Well, let's try to untangle this web a bit.
Sure.
What are some of the key factors that contribute to this problem?
One prominent explanation focuses on the social dynamics at play. For many people, especially young men, belonging to a football fan group fulfills a very basic human need. The need for belonging, for identity, for being part of something larger than themselves.
It's like finding your tribe, right?
Yeah.
But in a very destructive way.
That's the tragedy of it, this tribal mentality, while natural, can easily be twisted. It creates this us versus them dynamic that can lead to aggression and violence towards anyone perceived as an outsider.
Right.
Especially rival fans.
But wouldn't belonging to a positive, supportive group be a better way to channel that need for belonging?
Yeah.
What makes these violent groups so appealing?
That's a crucial question, and this is where things get really interesting. The sources suggest that economic and cultural factors play a significant role. Many areas where hooliganism is most prevalent struggle with issues like poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion.
So people are feeling disillusioned.
Yeah.
Angry, maybe even hopeless.
Yeah.
And they're looking for an outlet for those feelings.
Exactly. Football can become a focal point for that anger.
Yeah.
A way to lash out against a system that they feel has failed them. For some, joining a violent group might offer a sense of power and control that they lack in other areas of their lives.
It's a misguided sense of empowerment.
It is.
But I can see how it might be seductive.
Yeah.
Especially for someone who feels powerless or marginalized.
Right.
Are there other factors that contribute to this toxic mix?
There are.
Okay.
And this might be controversial, but the sources actually point to the media's role in all of this. The way hooliganism is often portrayed, still, sometimes even romanticized, can actually contribute to the problem.
You mean it's like giving them free publicity almost?
In a way, yes. The sensationalism surrounding these incidents can inspire copycat behavior, particularly among young people who are seeking attention or a sense of belonging. It's like this dangerous feedback loop.
It makes you think about how we as a society contribute to the problem.
Yeah.
Without even realizing it.
Yeah.
It's not just about condemning the violence.
Right.
It's about being mindful of how we portray it.
Exactly.
And the messages we send.
The messages we send.
And of course, we can't forget the role of alcohol and drugs.
Of course.
While they're not the sole cause.
Right.
They definitely exacerbate the
Yeah,
problem.
they lower inhibitions, they heighten aggression,
Right.
making violent outbursts more likely.
I guess that's almost a given,
Yeah,
but it's worth mentioning.
worth mentioning.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the why of hooliganism, and it's a pretty disturbing picture.
Yeah.
But what about the consequences?
Right.
What's the real impact
Yeah.
of this problem
Well,
beyond the immediate violence?
the consequences are far-reaching
Okay.
and often extend beyond the immediate physical harm.
Right.
This type of violence creates fear and division in communities,
Yeah.
particularly on match days.
Uh-huh.
It turns what should be a celebratory event into something people dread.
It's like this dark cloud hanging over what's supposed to be a positive, unifying experience.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's particularly damaging for children
Oh, absolutely.
who are witnessing this behavior.
They're seeing violence normalized, even glorified.
Yeah.
It sets a terrible example and can perpetuate this cycle of aggression for generations to come.
So we're talking about long-term social consequences.
Yes.
What about the economic fallout?
Right.
I imagine all this chaos has a price tag attached to it.
Oh, absolutely. The economic costs are enormous. We're talking about damage to stadiums and surrounding businesses,
Wow.
the loss of potential sponsorships due to negative publicity,
Right.
and overall damage to the reputation of football organizations.
Yeah, it hurts everyone involved.
It does.
And then there's the whole legal and security aspect.
Exactly. Governments and law enforcement agencies have to invest heavily in security measures
Yeah.
to try to prevent these incidents,
Wow.
which is a significant drain on resources.
Right.
And even with all that security, it's often difficult to fully contain the problem.
It feels like a never-ending battle.
It is.
And as you mentioned earlier, simply cracking down harder doesn't always seem to be the answer.
Right.
It feels like we're trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Yeah.
So what can be done?
Well,
Are there any solutions that actually address the root causes of hooliganism?
well, thankfully, the sources do offer some potential solutions.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah.
It's been pretty heavy so far.
Yeah.
So what are some of the strategies that might actually make a difference?
One of the most important ones, and I think you'll agree, is education and awareness,
Okay,
especially when it comes to young people.
that makes sense. If we can teach kids about the negative consequences of violence and promote a culture of sportsmanship and respect from a young age,
Yes.
maybe we can prevent them from going down this path in the first place.
Exactly.
But is education enough?
It's a crucial starting point,
Okay,
but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
right.
The sources also highlight the role of technology.
Okay.
Modern security systems, like
Wow.
high-resolution cameras, facial recognition software, and even biometric identification
Wow.
can help authorities monitor crowds,
Okay.
identify potential troublemakers, and gather evidence for prosecution.
It sounds a bit like Big Brother,
It does.
but if it helps prevent violence and hold people accountable,
Yeah,
maybe it's a necessary evil.
it's a tough balance.
Yeah, it is a delicate balance.
It is.
But these technologies can act as deterrents. And if used responsibly,
Yes,
they can create a safer environment for everyone.
they can.
Okay, so we've got education and technology.
Yes.
What about the legal side of things?
Right.
Can stricter laws help?
The sources emphasize the need for stricter laws
Hi.
and tougher punishments for hooliganism.
Okay.
Some experts argue that existing laws aren't strong enough to deter this behavior.
So closing legal loopholes
Yeah,
and making sure that there are real consequences
exactly.
for these actions.
Some countries are even experimenting with rehabilitative approaches,
Interesting.
like mandatory counseling programs or community service for convicted hooligans.
Okay.
The idea is to address the underlying issues that might be contributing to their behavior rather than just punishing them.
That's an interesting approach.
It is.
It seems more humane
Yeah.
and potentially more effective in the long run.
Right.
Instead of just throwing them in jail,
Yeah.
you're trying to help them understand and address the root causes of their behavior.
That's the idea. And it acknowledges that there's often more to the story
Right.
than just mindless thuggery.
Okay.
These individuals might be struggling with poverty addiction or lack of opportunity.
Huh.
Addressing those issues could be key to breaking the cycle of violence.
It makes you wonder if, in some cases,
Yeah.
these individuals are victims themselves,
Right.
caught in a system that's failed them.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's a perspective we shouldn't overlook.
It really highlights the complexity
It
of this issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about education technology and the legal system.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other strategies that we haven't touched on yet?
One final point that the sources highlight is alcohol control.
Okay.
Restricting alcohol sales in and around stadiums during matches can help reduce alcohol-fueled violence.
That seems like a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
Alcohol is so often a factor in these incidents.
It plays a significant role, and there's evidence that this type of restriction can be quite effective in reducing violence.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
It's clear that hooliganism is a complicated problem with no easy fixes.
Right.
But it sounds like there are at least some promising strategies out there.
There are.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that these strategies are most effective when they're used in combination.
Right.
It requires a coordinated effort from governments, law enforcement, football organizations, and even fans themselves.
Right, so it's not just a top-down solution.
Yeah.
We need this collective effort, this cultural shift that embraces the positive aspects of football.
Absolutely.
And rejects the violence and hatred.
Precisely. And that leads to a really important point that I think is often overlooked in these discussions.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
All of these solutions that we've discussed, education technology laws, alcohol control, they're all focused on external control, on trying to contain the problem from the outside. But what about the internal culture of football fandom itself? What can be done to foster a more positive and inclusive environment within the stands?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's not just about stopping the bad behavior.
Right.
It's about actively promoting good behavior.
Yes.
Creating a culture where violence and hatred aren't tolerated.
Exactly.
But how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we create that kind of cultural shift?
Well, that's where things get even more complex.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a question that goes beyond the scope of the sources we have today.
Okay.
But it's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. And it's a perfect place to leave our listener with something to think about.
I agree.
So listener, we're leaving you with this.
Yes.
What role can you play
Yeah.
in fostering a more positive and inclusive football culture?
It's a challenge worth considering.
It is.
But for now, we're going to take a short break.
Okay.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore even more potential solutions and delve deeper into the complexities of this issue.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've just spent the last while painting a pretty grim picture of hooliganism in Europe.
Yeah.
Exploring its history, the factors that fuel it, and the wide-ranging consequences.
It is a complex issue.
But it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
Thankfully, you provided sources that offer some potential solutions as well.
That's right. We've already touched upon the importance of education and early intervention, the potential of technology to deter and monitor violence, as well as the need for stricter laws and rehabilitative approaches.
Those all seem like reasonable steps, but I can't help but wonder, are these solutions enough on their own? It feels like we need to tackle this problem from multiple angles.
Absolutely. And one crucial aspect we haven't fully explored yet is the role of football organizations themselves.
Whoa.
They have a huge responsibility in shaping the culture within their fan bases.
So what kind of role can these organizations play? What concrete steps can they take?
Well, one key area is communication.
Okay.
They need to clearly and consistently condemn violence and promote positive fan behavior.
Yeah.
Think about public service announcements, social media campaigns, even messages displayed prominently in stadiums.
Right.
It's about sending a clear message that violence is unacceptable and has no place in the sport.
That sounds like a good starting point, but wouldn't that be like preaching to the choir?
Yeah.
I mean, the people who are already inclined towards violence probably aren't going to be swayed by a PSA.
That's true, but these campaigns aren't just targeted at the potential perpetrators.
Okay.
They're also aimed at the silent majority of fans who oppose violence.
Right.
It's about empowering them to speak up,
Yeah.
to challenge hateful behavior when they see it, and to create a culture where hooliganism is simply not tolerated.
So it's about creating a sense of collective responsibility.
Yeah.
Where fans feel empowered to police their own ranks, so to speak.
Exactly. And football organizations can take this a step further by implementing stricter security measures at matches.
Okay.
This could include things like more thorough bag checks, increased security personnel, and even designated fan zones to separate rival groups.
So wouldn't those measures be really expensive to implement?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it make going to a match feel less enjoyable, more like going through airport security?
There's definitely a balance to strike.
Yeah.
No one wants to turn a football match into a security lockdown.
Right.
but it's about finding ways to enhance security without sacrificing the overall fan experience.
Yeah.
Some organizations are experimenting with innovative approaches, like using AI-powered cameras to detect potential troublemakers in real time, or deploying specially trained stewards who can de-escalate situations before they turn violent.
So it's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Precisely.
About preventing incidents before they happen.
And another important step is to work with local communities and fan groups to identify and address the root causes of hooliganism in specific areas.
Okay.
This could involve supporting social programs that provide opportunities for at-risk youth, working with local law enforcement to crack down on organized crime linked to hooligan groups, or even just creating spaces for dialogue and understanding between rival fan groups.
I like that approach. It's about going beyond just treating the symptoms.
Yeah.
And actually trying to address the underlying issues that contribute to this problem.
Right.
It's a more holistic approach.
Yes.
Recognizing that hooliganism is often a reflection of deeper societal issues.
Exactly. And it recognizes that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works in one city or country might not be effective in another.
Of course.
It requires a tailored approach that takes into account the specific context and challenges of each location.
This all makes sense, but it also sounds like a massive undertaking. It requires cooperation and coordination between so many different stakeholders. Football organizations, governments, law enforcement agencies, community groups, even individual fans.
It takes a village.
It really does. It's a huge challenge, no doubt.
It is.
But I think what's encouraging is that there's a growing recognition that this is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And that requires this collaborative effort.
For sure.
We're starting to see some positive examples of organizations and communities coming together to find creative solutions.
Which is great.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's at least some hope that we can turn the tide on this problem.
There is definitely hope, and I think one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal is the power of storytelling.
Storytelling? I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about how we often hear about hooliganism.
Yeah.
It's usually in the context of sensationalized news reports.
Right.
Or dramatic footage of violence.
Okay.
But what if we started telling different stories about football?
Oh, yeah.
Stories that highlight the positive aspects of the game, the sense of community, the passion, the joy, the shared love for the sport.
You mean humanize the experience?
Yeah.
Shift the narrative away from the negativity and focus on the positive side of football culture.
Exactly. And these stories don't have to come from big media outlets. They can come from fans themselves, from local communities, from the players.
Right.
Think about social media campaigns that showcase the camaraderie between fans.
Yeah.
Documentaries that explore the history and traditions of different fan groups. Or even just simple acts of kindness and sportsmanship captured on video.
It's about changing the perception.
Yeah.
About reminding people that at its core, football is a beautiful game.
It is.
That brings people together.
It does.
It's about reclaiming that spirit and drowning out the voices of hatred and violence.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that can resonate with people on a deeper level than any law or security measure ever could.
It's about appealing to people's hearts, not just their heads.
Right.
It's about reminding them why they fell in love with the game in the first place.
You put it perfectly, and I think that's where the real power of change lies.
Okay, so we've talked about the need for a multi-pronged approach involving football organizations, communities, governments, and fans themselves.
Yes.
We've discussed the importance of shifting the narrative.
Yes.
And focusing on the positive aspects of football culture.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to digest.
It is.
But it's definitely given me some food for thought.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is an ongoing conversation.
For sure.
There's no easy fix for hooliganism.
Right.
It's a complex problem that requires ongoing effort and innovation.
Absolutely. And I think it's something we all need to be aware of and engage with, even if we're not directly affected by it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's about protecting the integrity of the game we love.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to our final part.
Okay.
Where we can delve a bit deeper into some of the ethical considerations surrounding these solutions.
Right.
And explore some even more unconventional ideas that are being proposed.
Sounds good to me. Let's dive in. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of football hooliganism.
Yeah.
It's been a heavy but important conversation so far. We've covered a lot of ground, the history, the motivations, the consequences, and even some potential solutions.
Right.
But I feel like there's still so much to unpack.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
As we explore solutions, we have to consider the ethical implications of our actions.
Right.
Some of the strategies we've discussed, like increased surveillance and stricter punishments, raise important questions about individual freedoms and privacy.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the need for security and control. But we can't forget about the potential downsides. For example, how do we ensure that these technologies aren't misused?
Right.
Or that they don't disproportionately target certain groups of fans?
Exactly. And that's where transparency and oversight become crucial.
Okay.
We need clear guidelines and regulations governing the use of these technologies. And we need independent bodies to monitor their implementation and ensure that they're being used ethically and responsibly.
It sounds like we need a delicate balance.
We do.
Between security and freedom.
It is delicate balance.
And that balance might look different in different contexts, depending on the specific challenges each community faces.
Precisely. It's not about finding a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather about tailoring our approach to the unique circumstances of each situation.
Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as we evaluate these different solutions.
Yeah.
Are there any other ethical dilemmas we should be considering?
Well, one that often comes up is the question of collective punishment. Some argue that banning entire groups of fans or imposing stricter penalties on everyone because of the actions of a few is unfair and counterproductive.
Yeah, I could see how that would be controversial.
It is.
It punishes innocent people.
Yes.
And might even alienate fans who would otherwise be allies in the fight against hooliganism.
Exactly. It's a complex issue and there's no easy answer.
Right.
But it's important to have these conversations and weigh the potential benefits against the potential harms.
It seems like every solution comes with its own set of challenges and trade-offs.
That's the nature of complex problems. There are no simple solutions.
Right.
And any action we take will have both positive and negative consequences.
So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for finding a solution that addresses the problem?
I think there is.
Okay.
Without creating new ones.
Yeah.
And I think part of the solution lies in shifting our focus away from punishment and towards prevention. Instead of just reacting to incidents of violence, we need to create environments that discourage hooliganism in the first place.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? What would a preventative approach look like in practice?
Well, one idea that's gaining traction is the concept of positive fan culture.
Okay.
This involves actively promoting the values of respect, tolerance, and sportsmanship within fan communities. It's about celebrating the passion and camaraderie of football while rejecting the negativity and violence.
So it's about changing the culture from the inside out, starting with the fans themselves.
Exactly. And this can take many forms.
Okay.
Fan-led initiatives, educational programs, community outreach, even collaborations between rival fan groups to foster dialogue and understanding.
Those are some great ideas.
Yeah.
But I imagine it takes a lot of effort and commitment.
It does.
To really shift a culture that's been entrenched for so long.
That's a long game. But I think what's encouraging is that we're starting to see some really inspiring examples of this happening around the world.
Really?
Fans are taking ownership of the problem and creating positive change within their own communities.
That's really heartening to hear.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It sounds like there's a real grassroots movement emerging.
Yeah.
Driven by people who genuinely love the game and want to see it thrive.
That's right. And I think that's where the real hope lies.
Yeah.
It's in the collective will of the fans to reclaim their sport.
Right.
And make it a force for good.
So to bring this back to our listener, what's the key takeaway here? What can they do to be part of this positive change?
I think the most important thing is to be aware.
Okay.
Recognize that hooliganism is a complex problem with deep roots. And that solutions require a multifaceted approach.
So don't just be a bystander.
No.
Be an active participant in creating a more positive and inclusive football culture.
Exactly. Challenge hateful behavior when you see it.
Yeah.
Support initiatives that promote tolerance and understanding.
Okay.
And most importantly, don't give up hope.
Beautifully said. This deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least.
It has.
We've explored the dark side of football, but we've also seen glimmers of hope.
Yeah.
And the potential for positive change.
The potential is there.
And it's a reminder that ultimately the future of the game is in our hands.
It is in our hands.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. A huge thank you to you, expert speaker, for sharing your insights and expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. Always happy to delve into these challenging topics.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive has given you a deeper understanding of the complexities of football hooliganism.
Yes.
And inspired you to be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to all the sources we discussed.
All the good stuff.
And be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.
Yes.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.